You don't fail at life in some dramatic way. You don't crash and burn or make one catastrophic mistake that ruins everything. You simply stop trying long enough for nothing to change. And then you call that proof that trying was pointless in the first place. Even though what actually happened is that you quit the moment the discomfort stopped feeling exciting and started feeling real. You've done this more than once, where you start something new with energy and intention, maybe a habit, a routine, a skill, or a plan you genuinely believed might change things. And at first there's momentum, maybe even hope. But then resistance shows up quietly in the form of fatigue, awkwardness, boredom, or doubt. And because nothing obvious improves right away, you drift back to what's familiar without making a conscious decision to quit. And a few weeks later your life looks exactly the same. Except now you've added another silent conclusion that says, I already tried that. Fast forward a few years and the details change, but the pattern doesn't. Because the same problems are still there, the same conversations keep repeating, and the same sense that time is accelerating sits in the background. While you tell yourself that eventually things will calm down and you'll commit for real. Even though they never do, because this pattern didn't start recently. It started the first time you quit early and justified it as logic instead of calling it what it was. What's actually happening is simpler than people like to admit, because your brain interprets discomfort as information, and when something feels slow, effortful, or unrewarding, your nervous system reads that sensation as a signal to stop, not because the action is failing, but because it's unfamiliar, and adaptation almost never feels like progress at first. It feels like resistance. Which means the phase where something is actually working is the exact phase most people abandon it. When things stop feeling good, most people don't make adult decisions. They make relief decisions. Because you never stay long enough to reach that phase, you never collect real data about whether something works for you. You only collect first impressions, and first impressions are almost always misleading. Especially when the thing you're trying requires patience, repetition, or a temporary drop in comfort before any improvement becomes visible. This problem gets amplified in a high dopamine environment where distraction is instant and effort can always be escaped. Because easy stimulation dulls feedback, and when you can scroll, snack, binge, or distract yourself the moment something feels uncomfortable, you lose the ability to feel whether an action is slowly working, not because it isn't, but because the signal is being constantly numbed, which is why dopamine doesn't relax you. It erases feedback, and without feedback every effort feels pointless. Action isn't about intensity or motivation or forcing yourself to care more. It's about duration, about staying with something long enough to get honest information, long enough that it stops feeling exciting, long enough that it becomes boring, long enough that quitting would feel like relief, because that is where learning actually happens. Not in the first week and not in the part you tell people about, but in the stretch most people never endure. What actually works for people who do change isn't intensity or motivation or some perfect plan they found online. It's that they treat their lives like a series of small experiments instead of a single verdict on who they are. They pick one thing to adjust, stay with it longer than feels reasonable, pay attention to what improves and what doesn't, and then they adapt instead of quitting, which is why progress for them looks slow, unglamorous, and almost invisible from the outside, but very different over time. You don't need more information, and you don't need a better plan, because you already know what matters. What you haven't done is stay long enough for anything to change. And if nothing looks different a year from now, it won't be because you didn't try. It will be because you quit too early again, even though this life does not loop and there is no second run where you get to test it properly.